Hi, Yogi. Welcome to another episode of our Lights On podcast. Thank you so much for being here, for taking your time, to listen to me ramble on about a number of topics, about yoga philosophy, theory, history. Basically, this is a platform for me to share my passion about yoga and, more importantly, my passion about traditional yoga, which is actually something that we don't see being talked about enough on the mainstream media, which is actually a part of the reason that motivated this conversation today. So, I have a guest today, and we're going to be talking about cultural appropriation in the yoga industry. And actually, this is a topic that I felt like I shouldn't really be speaking about because I'm a white yoga teacher, and I felt like it wasn't really my place to be diving deeper into this topic. But then I thought, well, one, if you want to be an ally, you do need to speak up. And two, you love yoga so much, or I love yoga so much. I just felt like I really needed to share my views and thoughts on this matter because when you love something, you feel hurt when you see it being disrespected, and that's really what I feel like when I hear people teach yoga in a way that it's not respecting the roots of yoga or is not respecting the true nature of the yoga practice. So I'm actually joined by a dear friend of mine, Anish. We're both yoga teachers. We've connected over yoga and, more importantly, classical yoga. So we're here today to tell you a little bit more about what cultural appropriation in the yoga space is, some red flags that you may spot in the industry, and what to do and what not to do if you do want to make sure that you are honoring the roots of yoga. So I hope that the conversation is interesting. This is something that you want to listen to tell you a little bit more about Aneesh. So, just like me, he's a yoga instructor and a health coach. His platform, Svasthyasadhana, it's very much a space where he wants to share his knowledge and to share the essence of yoga and also help people live a healthier life and enjoy from a higher quality of life by practicing yoga and learning about the essence of yoga. So, without any further ado, we are going to start our conversation. As usual, we keep this very, very informal. So, I hope you enjoy, and let's start. Hi, Anish. It's so great to have you. Thank you for participating in this conversation. So, I'm super looking forward to this conversation because this is something that we've been sort of discussing as well between us behind the scenes. It's something that we see, sadly, quite a lot. So, I'm really looking forward to having your perspective, your insight as well. And as we've been doing in other episodes with other guests, we keep these conversations really, really informal. So, please, guys listening, just sort of ease into this conversation if you want to grab, I don't know, a coffee or a tea. I don't know when you'll be listening to us, but yeah, we'll be keeping this super informal and just having sort of a chat over a few topics. I'll try to guide this conversation as much as I can because this is quite a big one, and hopefully you'll be able to um, understand a few things that you can do or the things that you can look out for if you are worried about cultural appropriation in the yoga industry, and if you want to learn how you can maybe fight against it or understand how and when it happens so that you can move away from it. Anish, thank you so much for taking the time. Do you want to start just by introducing yourself briefly? Tell us a little bit more about you and your yoga journey up until this point.
Hey friends, my name is Anish. As you know already, I am a yoga and wellness instructor and a health coach. I've been practicing yoga for about 6 years, and out of 6 years now, I've been teaching for last 4 years. I do online workshops, in-person workshops, and the purpose is basically to spread the essence of yoga. I practice Hatha yoga, and that's what my workshops are aimed at. And that's what we're going to do today
Yeah.
when we talk about cultural appropriation.
hmm Yeah, we'll be exploring a little bit about I guess what is yoga and what is not yoga, because yoga has become really popular, which is amazing and something that we're definitely very grateful for. But with popularity also comes this side where things start losing their essence. They start losing their nature, and they, especially yoga, what you see nowadays is a very watered down version of the practice
True.
of hatha yoga and even other styles of yoga. So, Anisha, I'm going to kick off the conversation by asking you, why is it important that we talk about cultural appropriation, and why is it important that we encourage students, practitioners, yoga teachers to honor the roots of yoga and look into the true essence of yoga?
Hmm. Cultural appropriation, as we know, is adopting the elements of from one culture,
Mm,
specifically by the people of another culture, without understanding or respecting the cultural content. So from my personal experience, it is definitely crucial to discuss about it and understand it. One, to promote the awareness about yoga and respect for its origins. Secondly, and most importantly, it encourages a mindful approach, preventing the commodification and misrepresentation of a tradition
mm,
deeply rooted in a diverse cultural histories. Third, it gives a meaning to our practice, makes it more holistic.
mhm,
It helps us to understand the essence of yoga, which is the key here. So be it a teacher or a student, our goal is to create a space or find a space that honors the cultural roots of yoga
mhm,
and fosters a more inclusive and mindful community. And that only happens when we understand exactly and we appreciate the culture and not appropriate the culture. So
mhm.
that's I believe that's the key here.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to understand also where it came from, and why the practice is the way it is. Because if you don't do that, then you're really missing out. And especially when we mention these watered down versions of yoga, it's really sad because you are not you are missing out. You're not having access to the full potential of the practice, and it may serve your purpose, if especially if you're looking for more of a physical practice. But then you're missing out on this amazing tool that will sort of really propel you on a self-development journey and a self-healing journey. So
True,
it's a lot more than just uh, being fit at the end of the day, or working out, or even increasing flexibility. I would say those are very good sort of benefits of the practice, but they're definitely not the intention of yoga, or not the ultimate goal of the practice. And I think the more
yes,
we understand about this, um, the more access we'll have to more benefits beyond just the physical, because we're not just physical beings, right? We're a lot more than that. We're not just our bodies. So I think honoring that, and as you said, trying to get down to the essence of the practice is really important, just so that we can actually practice something that is benefiting our entire selves.
true.
Um, and so when it comes to like understanding cultural appropriation and spotting cultural appropriation, what are some of the red flags that you see in studios? I'll share mine as well, that I've come across in these past years. But what are some of the red flags that the moment you step into a studio, oh, okay, this is not the place to be?
Yeah, that's like when you say more or when you say few, I don't know whether it's the few or the more thing, but
Mm,
definitely there are red, and especially in the, I would say like how yoga studios have amplified the number of studios and number of people who are taking the yoga teacher trainings from not so reliable sources, not so reliable places, just for the so it's like only multiplying now. So if you ask me from my personal experience, number one thing that comes to my mind is, which I see very frequently since I keep moving across countries in Hong Kong, in Korea, now I'm in Sweden, and not and also in parts of India, not really
mm,
like, is that the superficial use of the cultural symbols. When I say that, specifically if talk about the yoga studio decors,
mhm,
like decorating yoga studios with out of the context religious symbols, cultural artifacts or imagery without proper understanding, potentially creating an environment that lacks cultural sensitivity, but just for the ambience, just for the aesthetics of the studio, they are using this. Like, for example, you must have seen if you go to a studio, you would see a symbol of Om, lotus flower, and then they really don't know where to put it exactly, how to place it, how to put it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you find it just over
Ends
the
up on
shoe
the floor.
racks or
Ends up on the
sometimes on the
floor.
floor. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. So that's one. Second, which I also have experienced quite a bit in, like selecting or borrowing a part of the yoga philosophy, or like a superficial adoption of yoga, if I may say so. It's like you are very selective. You want to become a studio which only promotes meditation, or you only talk about mindfulness without acknowledging the broader perspective or the philosophical context and ethical principles, which are key to the traditional yoga.
Mm-hmm.
You are promoting specific yoga poses. You just want to keep people to keep doing headstands, difficult poses, show your flexibility, show your strength, and that's what people come to you for. You are only doing, say, mantra chants or rituals, and that's how you want to promote yoga without understanding how they stand, where they stand in the complete picture, or there is no understanding of the cultural or the historical context, and that's how you are promoting it, and that's how people are also learning from you. And instead of holistically or again making people understand the traditional values, you are making or presenting yoga into like a trendy fitness routine.
Mm.
There is, completely divorcing it from their original purpose. Or
Yeah.
yeah, and the next one, if I may talk about, is of course there is no cultural context at places. Complete lack of cultural context. So there are classes, there are instructors who are trying to use Sanskrit verses, but they don't know the context of those verses, whether they even fit into, but they are just trying to showcase their knowledge of Sanskrit
Yeah.
or the verses. And of course,
Sanskrit is hard as well. Sanskrit is a
it is
very
hard. And
complex language.
nowhere in yoga philosophy or Indian philosophy they say you should teach in Sanskrit or you should show your knowledge of
Mhm.
Sanskrit. It's and it's in vain if you don't understand what is the purpose of a particular verse, or what is the purpose of a particular sentence that you are trying to imply, that you are trying to use.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I sometimes avoid going too much into mantra because one, I don't fully understand it. I
True.
don't understand the nuances behind it. I also teach online, so I think sometimes mantra doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work so well online, let's be honest. It's a practice that I feel like it really fosters community, but you kind of need to have a physicality there in the space, right? It's something that you share, but it's just being mindful because I'm quite precious about people pronouncing Sanskrit right because I think it's just it shows how we care about something that we love. It's the way to show care, but at the same time, it's important that we also do that with an understanding of what it means and why I'm saying the things the way I'm saying. Because if I
Yeah.
don't know what's going on, I'm
Yeah.
not
And
gonna.
also,
I don't know what I'm teaching.
if I jump in, the use of namaste, like I have been to classes where like it has become like a how should I say it, like a standard operating process, that the class
Yeah,
should start with namaste, there should be a mantra, and then there should be whatever you do between that class. Like it can be a Pilate plus yogas, it can be yoga, it can be a yoga
yeah.
flow, which looks more like a dance flow, and then it ends with a mantra and it ends with a namaste without understanding why we are using namaste.
Yeah, it's almost as if people or teachers feel the need to use namaste to sort of validate that they're a yoga teacher without really understanding what it is. I don't use namaste personally. I wasn't taught to say it, so why should I say it in the first place? If anything, we would start with with a mantra, or we would say namaskar or namaskara instead, but that's why I was taught. But even then, I don't use it so much because if I'm interacting with, I don't know, they're just my students. I say hi. I'm a normal human being. Like
True.
I speak Portuguese. I speak English. It's fine. I'm still welcoming them into an environment of yoga. with my energy and with the practice. I don't have to be worried about saying namaste just to make sure that, oh, if I say it, then I'm a yoga teacher, then I'm practicing, yoga.
Correct. So there is definitely an essence in that you start any learning process with a prayer, and
Mm,
that prayer should have a meaning and what you are going to do, rather than just without thinking you just pick up a
yeah.
mantra and start chanting. And your students did a lot of times when you get into a class, you find new students joining, and it's a group class, and then you see the scenario where they're standing and they're blindly trying to, they
Mhm.
don't even know how the words are because it's in
Yeah.
Sanskrit, and they are just trying to be there and wondering what's happening, and
Yeah.
then they just start following the teacher, and that's how the class happens, and then they go back, and some of them may never come back because they don't know what's happening,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there was no time or no effort from the teacher to explain it. So that's another thing. And then of
Mhm.
course, like when I go, I also find the lack of diversity. Like
Mhm.
when I get to the classes, then teachers are not really supportive, or the studios are not really supportive. They are not really inclusive at times when they are
Mhm.
trying to sign up new members. They feel that instead of being inclusive, they feel they may be the odd person out, or they may have
Mhm.
problems or whatever reasons they cite. So this is one more, which goes against the
Yeah.
basic culture and basic tradition and the message of yoga, but I see that happening quite often.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even direct, right? It's not something that you
No.
feel directly, or it's not something that they would necessarily tell you to your face, but you feel like there's a difference in the way
Yes.
that they present themselves, in the way that
Yes.
that the studio is built, and how the studio is perhaps like decorated. There's
True.
always like this vibe to it, right? Where you feel like, actually, this is made for a very specific group of people.
Yes.
And that really upsets me because that puts a lot of people off yoga, people that would benefit
True.
immensely from yoga, and because they had
Yes.
that bad experience that one time in that
Yes.
one yoga studio, they never set foot into yoga practice again, into a yoga class again, and they never practice yoga.
Yes.
So now it's
And
up to us to deconstruct those false beliefs and make them
true.
safe again in yoga, which is really hard to do.
Yeah. Yes, that's so true. Like it becomes, for example, if I am in a different country, and it's also good for my social health. So I go to a yoga
Mhm.
studio, not necessarily for yoga, but also to meet like-minded people who are practicing
Yeah, it's community that you
same. It's
you
a
build.
community. We are part of it, and it's part of my social health as well. But when you get to a studio and you unfortunately face such circumstances, it really puts you off, and then you want to practice at home rather than getting to a studio.
Yeah, and that's assuming that you even want to practice at home, because so many people feel I've had so many people say, especially when I was sort of launching the Yoga for Beginners course, and I've had people come to me and say that they wouldn't have tried it otherwise, and that they just didn't believe that they had the right body to practice yoga. And sadly you hear this a lot, and that is a red flag for me, because that means that the places that these people went to, they were not yoga studios, not true yoga
Correct.
studios. They were not teaching yoga, because yoga, first off, is not about your
No.
body. It's not about a physical practice.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with the physical part, with a physical practice. I mean, if anything, a small part of it has to do with physical poses that we do with
Yeah.
our bodies, but that's a tiny bit of the practice, and even those, they have multiple variations and can be done in a number of different ways to make sure that you
Yeah.
can do them with your body. So
Yeah.
that's a big one for me, and that really saddens me when people say, oh, I thought I wasn't supposed to practice yoga because I'm not fit, or I'm a little bit overweight, or I can't reach my toes. I mean, yeah, that's what we build through the practice of yoga. Why would you be expected to walk into a class and be flexible?
Yeah. Yeah. And one more thing I see is also like now I remember stereotyping or misrepresentation. And I see now a lot of yoga studios with this merchandise, with the prints of Lord Shiva, Lord Ganesha, or Om, and all over. And then they are just available as a fashion merchandise. But
Yeah.
traditionally, if you wear them, there is a significance to it. Whenever you are talking about Lord Shiva or Lord Ganesha or any other deity,
Mm,
they represent something, and that's
yeah.
that's how it is. But there is no explanation, no briefing, nothing. It's just available as a fashion merchandise, and people want
Yeah.
to just wear it and show that okay, they are part of this. XYZ group or
Mhm.
community, which is
Oh
again,
yeah, they must be so
distressing.
enlightened because they're wearing like a t-shirt with like
Yeah,
this god on it that they have no
yeah,
idea
yeah.
what the god is
True, true,
about.
true.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I think poorly,
Yeah,
this is a bad comparison, but it's the same way as you like walking into this random church and you've never been into a church before, and then suddenly you have like t-shirts with like the face of Jesus on it, but you're
true.
not even really sure what Jesus is about or what he
Correct.
preached or what he stood for, right?
Yeah,
You just walk in and you buy
yeah,
because it's fashionable and because the
correct.
image is sort of popular and you kind of want
Yeah,
to wear it just because you feel like you'll belong. Yeah. It's
yeah,
the same thing, right? I think we do that sometimes without being aware that actually these deities that we see, the Om that we see represented, Lord Shiva that we see in statues and represented in pictures and images in yoga studios, we don't recognize their significance, and we don't recognize that actually they are deities for some
yeah,
people, for some cultures, and therefore we should be able to respect them the same way we expect others to respect our own beliefs and the gods and the deities that we believe in. And I think that's why we were saying that, a red flag, a big one that I see as well. It's when they place these deities, these representations of Lord Shiva or whoever they are near Shurak or on the floor, which is something that I
yeah,
see very commonly. I mean, if you think about it, the feet, especially in this culture or even most cultures, it's the lower part of the body, right? It's the part that is in touch with the floor, so it tends to be the part that is the less pure of your entire body. So why would you put a deity that you believe is higher than yourself next to your feet?
correct.
It doesn't make a
So,
lot of sense.
because there is no understanding and they just want to look their studio or place aesthetically good with the trying to put a right impression on the student, so maybe they can give them right amount of money for the classes.
Yeah, yeah. And we get really passionate as well in this discussion, and we don't want to like come across as too like passionate or too aggressive or anything, but there are certain things that should be observed, and the more you know them and the more you start recognizing them, I think also the more access you'll have to a yoga that is going to be a lot better for you. And it's not going to be only about your body, but it's going to be about you as a holistic being, right? It's going to be about you and your entire self, and a journey that is not just one to help you become more flexible, but it's one that it's going to help you live a better life, and that should not be underestimated. Um, so yeah, any other red flags, Anish, that you've spotted that you want to share?
Well,
Well,
in terms of, I think red flags, we have already shared so many red flags,
we could
but
keep going, mind you. I do
and
have another one that
like
I'll mention.
yeah, I can talk about like these days this trend of yoga games, which is becoming more like festivities and rather than getting yoga is a serious thing. If you
Hmm.
ask me, it's not easy, but the way it has been projected, the dance and light festival with all the merchandise, music, and it's becoming more like a music festival now.
Yeah,
And you do all you can do in the name of yoga.
yeah,
And it's getting bigger and bigger because people are having experiences they would have at a music festival. They can buy stuff, they can eat
yeah,
sattvic food, as they say, and they can enjoy all the music. They can do yoga, they can meditate. I don't know how it is possible for people who cannot even, like, yoga is a very individual practice at the same time. How
hmm,
it is going to benefit, it's much deeper than just dancing around, socializing and eating, drinking. So yoga games, this is one more thing which catches my attention a
yeah,
lot and lot in terms of how the trend is changing, how the trend is moving, and it's becoming more like a festival. Festivals are good, celebration is good, but at the same time, if you lose touch to the hows and the whys and the whats, then it becomes
yeah,
more like a
yeah.
mockery of the entire tradition.
And I think that's it exactly. Like the problem is not the studios, the problem is not the festivals, the problem is not that you're celebrating it in your own way. It's just that sometimes you do it without understanding what's behind what you're doing.
Yes,
So maybe just a little bit more research, and then you can decide for yourself whether that's something that you want to be a
true,
part of
true.
or not.
True.
I think that that's really the point. And I think it's
Yes.
also interesting how yoga is usually only associated with certain type of music, certain type of dancing, and certain type of clothing. When again, yoga is a personal experience. The way I understand yoga may be very different. Um,
True.
as long as I'm respecting the culture and I'm aware of what I'm doing and I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'll give you an example with myself. Like, I like to dress up, I like to put on makeup. Probably that goes against the idea of being a yogi, where it should be someone that doesn't care about appearances, doesn't care about the clothes. I do. They make me feel good about myself. I'm so why
I
why
think if
should I
you,
not do it
I
and
think if
not
you
be a
ask
yogi?
me, originally,
Hmm.
no, yoga is not against it. I don't think so. Like
Yeah.
after reading yoga philosophy, and that is the part of the, if
Mhm.
you recall the yamas and niyamas, they talk
Yeah.
about the cleanliness as the first thing. They talk about taking care of yourself as the first thing. But if I look at the in the recent times, I think keeping that unkempt look,
Yeah.
wearing all those things and how you want to, like if you don't have a certain look, people don't think you are in
Yeah.
yoga. And that is becoming like a new trend that you have to be unkempt, you have to be like, you can't be really looking well dressed. Like you can still wear suits, you can still wear jackets, you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
still wear coats, right? Even if you are a yogi. I
Exactly.
do that. I
I
mean,
work in the
all
corporate
the time.
world. Like, I like to dress up. I like
So,
to wear high heels.
so
Like,
yeah, so nowhere it is written that you should
yeah,
not be doing your karma when you are a yogi.
yeah,
You are supposed to do
absolutely,
what you are supposed to do.
absolutely.
But yeah, that's another good highlighted point that if you go around and you will see everyone trying to fit in using some kind of that look, creating that look to fit into that yoga world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's about understanding the practice for yourself and being respectful
Yes,
towards it.
true.
But then you can
Absolutely.
experience it in your own way. And if there's anything that yoga is against, quote unquote, is attachment, and that has nothing to do with you being. That's another conversation for another day, because if we get into
Yeah,
attachment, we're gonna
that's
let's digress here.
that would be a good
But
conversation to have.
that's yeah. But that's the point, right? Like, as long as you're not attached to it, then you can just enjoy life. I mean, you're here
Yeah,
in this world to live it, to
true.
experience it, to enjoy it. It's not gonna yoga sometimes I feel like is also seen as a form of escapism. Oh, let's just go to to a mountain, and let's go just to a cave and then just shut us from the world. That's actually not yoga. Yoga should help you live in the world as it is today, and not as just an escape route. So anyway, that's another conversation. But yeah, just to say that sometimes when they have like
Yes.
these very particular looks about themselves, and they there's just particular parts of songs and things, and you don't have to restrict yourself to that, and you can still be practicing yoga. So don't worry about that. I also
True.
wanted to touch on quickly on something that also annoys me a little bit, and it's these practices around like dog yoga and goat yoga and um,
Beer yoga.
beer yoga is probably the best I've ever encountered, because I feel like dog yoga and goat yoga, I mean, they can be cute, right? Maybe don't call it yoga, call it something else, but they're cute, they're fun, it's fine. Doesn't necessarily go against any of the principles of yoga to be practicing yoga with an animal or in nature. Actually, yoga is about nature. But beer yoga for me has to be something that is just beyond belief, because it actually goes against
Yeah,
the nature of the
there are,
practice.
and I dare not to mention, but it's
Mm,
getting weirder and weirder. Like it has moved way beyond to from like they just put an adjective before yoga and then
yeah,
they create a session around it. So
yeah.
it's getting to some weird places and weird uh, practices now.
Hmm. I just wish that again, like, you can still do them. They can still be fun, but maybe don't mention yoga. Don't use the word
True.
yoga, and that
Yeah.
everything will be fine.
I think it gets to a point where you, instead of the use of the word, you start abusing the word just to
Yeah,
trying to create your or monetize the word.
yeah, just to earn money and
Yeah.
popularity, or whatever.
Mm.
Okay, I feel like we can keep going about red flags because there are so many, but I will move us on to the next topic, which is about the do's and the don'ts. So you've spotted these red flags. You may be aware now of some of the red flags that you can see in studios and classes. But what should you do and what should you not do to, well, what should you avoid, or let me start this again. What should you not do if you want to avoid cultural appropriation, and what should you do to honor the roots of yoga in your own practice? Let's maybe start with the don'ts and then we move on to the do's. Sorry, this was very
Yeah.
confusing, everybody.
So I think what we already talk about would give some idea on what are we looking at.
Mm,
But in respect to the do's and don'ts, maybe if we talk about the don'ts first,
mm-hmm,
first thing that comes to mind is be you are a student or a teacher.
mm-hmm,
Whatever symbols you are using, you should try to read about them, you should try to understand them and then use them. So please be don't promote or don't use superficially anything, be it the symbols, be it mantras, be it that try to understand them. And
and if you don't
you
understand them, don't use them.
don't use them. Yes. And
And it's fine to
also,
not understand something. I don't understand many mantra. I don't understand many
yes,
symbols.
we are
I don't
humans.
understand many deities. I don't use them. It's
We are human and it's okay.
mhm,
Nowhere in yoga says that you need to know all that is everything.
yeah,
It's that you should know what works for you and you should
yeah,
start from there and slowly, it's a process.
yeah.
So
And it's
trust
yoga.
the
It's a
process.
lifetime thing. It's a multiple lifetime thing
Correct.
anyway. So
Absolutely. Second is that if you are a teacher, especially, don't overemphasize on just one part of yoga. Like,
mhm,
for example, the asana practice, the physical part of yoga. Try to make it more holistic so people understand the culture, people understand the traditional, people understand the philosophy behind what they are doing.
mhm,
So, for most of us, asana or the posture practice is the entry point to the yoga. But I see it, I call it, it's like the door to the house. So
mhm,
don't just stand there. So get into the house, enjoy the entire house. So there is much more. That's where the entire experience it's much
mhm,
more holistic. And then the next one I would come to is cultural stereotyping. Just don't get into don't stereotype, don't get elemental,
mhm,
don't use things again without any context to them. Don't just stick to one part of it. Give a holistic picture to whoever you're talking, whoever is learning from you, or wherever you are going.
mhm,
Last is, it becomes little controversial at times when I talk about it. Appropriate attire. What is an appropriate attire? That
mhm,
basically, if you are wearing anything with deity symbols on your clothes, or you're wearing anything with Om, there is nothing wrong with it. Just try to understand the purpose of
mhm.
the
What it
symbol,
means. Mhm,
yes, what it means. And when you are wearing it, you are wearing it with a certain uh, how do I say it in English? Like a feeling, you are carrying some vibes, you are carrying a vibration with you. And so use it with a purpose rather than creating a trend or using it as a fashion trend and then getting into situations or getting into a places where
yeah.
it's not meant to, it doesn't, it doesn't go with the situation or the place you are getting
And
into.
if you do a little bit of research on what these symbols and what these mantra, what these words or even deities stand for, it becomes very obvious for you when and how you should use them. So it's not hard to then figure out once you
No,
understand what
not
they
at
are.
all, not at all.
And yeah, as you say, there might not be anything wrong with it, but once you do understand what they stand for, then it's very easy for you to spot,
Yeah,
what is a red flag and what is not, and what should be used.
true. You are not just wearing the attire as a trend. You should also understand the significance of that particular thing, and then I think the respect
Mm,
automatically comes in. Just it's just not a trivia that there is a reason why we used to place deities on the clothes. Just try to understand it, use it. So don't
yeah.
ignore the cultural context when you're getting into it.
Yeah.
Coming to the do's part, shall I get into the do's now? So
Mm-hmm.
do's, I think one of the most important thing what I have learned in my own practice as a student, as a teacher is ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
be curious, educate yourself. So when I say ask questions, normally it's we tend to get into asking questions about yoga, learning about yoga. Yes, that's true. But I think what is more important is when you step into that studio, ask questions about the teacher. Try to
Mm-hmm.
learn about the teacher. And it comes from, and that's the reason that the guru or the teacher or the shishya uh, or the disciple or the student. This tradition has been very strong in the, especially in the Indian tradition, or
Mhm.
even if you go to any ancient traditional system of education, the guru and shishya philosophy is there. So you have to choose your teacher wisely. You have to see. So ask questions about the teacher if you don't know about the teacher. If you get into a studio who has multiple teachers and you want to practice long term, you should know your teachers. And this is where your learning is coming from. This learning will build your perspective on yoga. So it is very, very important to ask yourself
Mhm.
and ask other people, about the
Yeah.
teacher to know. And second thing is educate yourself, which comes from, I always mention the Svadhyaya part, the self-study part. It's one of the observances, the niyamas,
Mhm.
that self-study is also key. If you want to consistently practice yoga, read about it. Find the traditional, you will find all those, most of the studios have the books. They lend it to students. So you don't need to read the entire book. Just try to read the introduction part. Just try to have some idea on the yoga philosophy if you can't ask. So if you do these two things, three things, like asking questions, you are curious all the time. No, you are not going to disrespect anyone by
Yeah.
asking. That is your right. And then you educate yourself. I think rest of the things which we are going to talk about in the do's will come very naturally to you. You will automatically know the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I think it's such a good point because us as as teachers, like we want to talk about yoga. So the more questions you ask us, like the more passionate we become. And I
Yes,
love when people come to me and say, "Oh, where did you study, or how did you study, or can you tell me a little bit more about this, or why do we do why do we do the things that we do in class? Why do we do them this way and not another way?" And we'll tell you and we'll share. And we're not gatekeeping anything. And I think another thing is also what when you try to get to know your teacher, because some people get a little bit caught up in in yoga styles and yoga studios and what to practice and what style to practice, because honestly it's confusing. It's confusing even to me as a teacher to recognize all the styles and understand what do they do and what they're supposed to do. So I understand, from the point of view of a beginner, how even more complex that is. But I think my in that regard, this point is really important because it's not necessarily about the style that you practice. I think it's more about you getting to know a teacher really well and really resonating with that person. So don't worry about the style. Don't worry about the studio that you're in. Worry about the person that you're practicing with. And if you do that, like you can't go wrong, because that person will bring you on a journey. I think it's important as well that you shop around, quote unquote, when it comes to teachers, because we all of us, we have unconscious bias. It's a fact. Yoga teachers may be very advanced on their enlightenment journey, if you will, but there are certain things that they are very hard for people to let go, because we're humans and we have experienced life in a certain way, and therefore our teachings is very much based on the way that we've experienced things. um so shop around and understand um, who this person is for you, because as a teacher, I'm not meant to teach everybody. But there will be people that will be maybe drawn to my experiences and to the way I teach yoga, and rightfully so. So, but if I am for you, brilliant. If I'm not for you, that's okay as well. But like,
yes,
get to know
that's
your
true.
teachers, because
Yes,
we're all biased, even though we try really hard not to be. So do those questions, do ask those questions, do get to know your
yes,
teacher to make sure that you're practicing with somebody that you resonate with. that's
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 very, very
super important.
important. Yes, that's very important.
Sorry,
And
just to
keep,
give an example here as well from my personal practice, because I was as a student, as a yoga student, I practice with only two people pretty much. And I've been to classes, and it's exactly the same style, exactly the same place, like it's the same school but just a different teacher, and I did not enjoy the class.
yeah.
And it's the same style, it's exactly the same thing, it's the same structure, like they're teaching me effectively the same thing, and for some reason I don't enjoy their class, and I always go back to my two teachers, my two mentors, always. So it's a connection thing. So don't worry about styles. Sorry, Manish, keep going.
No, no, no. I was just trying to mention that do keep some time after the class. I've seen most of the students rushing into the classes and rushing out of the classes. Just keep those 5 minutes after the class as a student and ask teacher what happened in the class if you don't know. Just don't blindly follow what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. You need to understand every posture has a meaning. Every posture is a focus thing. You are supposed to meant to focus. So if you don't understand why a specific posture you are doing or a specific mindfulness practice or a meditation, it's okay to ask. You're not disrespecting
Mm-hmm.
anything, anyone there,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Yeah.
will be happy to address it. I think. I think
It's
most of them
also
would be.
absolutely, absolutely. It's also important to, and that point is again so important that you also do, and it's to keep your critical spirit, your critical mind with you in
Yeah.
class, because and I do that as well. Like I've been practicing in the same style and in the same school for 10 years of my life. There are things that they do I don't agree with, that I don't take with me, and that I don't incorporate them into my own teaching because I it just doesn't sit right. And that's fine. I still
Yeah.
practice, but I only take what resonates and I leave everything else. So if this happens to you in a particular exercise or a particular pose, I always say to people, like, at the end of the day, this is your practice. I'm here just holding space for you. And obviously, I'm guiding you through a practice, fair enough. But if there's anything that I say that doesn't make you feel comfortable, you can just skip it. Don't worry. If you
Yeah.
prefer to come to my class, just hear me speak and go on about yoga and just lie down and close your eyes. Maybe that's what you needed to do that day, you know? So keep your critical mind with you, and don't be afraid to to question things in a respectful way. You know, just ask questions, and also ask for variations, maybe for other practices, because for whatever reason, you know, the ones that were first suggested to you didn't work for you. That's fine. So um don't be afraid, again, of asking questions and learning
True.
more about the practice.
Yeah. So rest of the things I think will come, like I mentioned
Mhm.
already, very naturally. Other things, all the don'ts, please do that.
Mhm.
Respect the cultural symbols, incorporate a holistic approach in your practice. Don't just stick to one limb or
Mhm.
one part of yoga. Try to understand. Maybe you don't need, you are physically so fit, so maybe you don't need the strong posture practice. Maybe you need to move on to the next stage. Maybe you need some meditative practices for your mental health, or so identify what is your need and then try to use yoga as it would help you to get to
Mhm.
that, fulfill that need. And then, of course, I will always say support inclusivity. As a student,
Mhm.
respect the other students in the class. As a teacher, it's okay if somebody is struggling with the language, with something. I think most of the times I've realized people understand the language of yoga if they don't understand the spoken language. So if they are there, they are very brave, they are courageous. So support that part and be inclusive.
Mhm.
So it should be you are appreciating all the cultures rather than appropriating it. So
Yeah.
understand and acknowledge that they are there or everyone else is there.
Yeah. That's such a good point, being inclusive, because actually, as I was, I feel like this is a problem. You know, maybe I shouldn't be speaking about this. This is a little bit controversial, but there's something that I don't appreciate about yoga culture in India, in particular. And there's this very nature about it, when sort of teachers and masters, they're put on this pedestal. And
Yeah.
that really rubs me off in the wrong way. Especially because I do feel like I'm a problem. I'm a person that has issues with authority. As a person, I struggle with
Yeah.
it a little bit. Um, but also because I
I
think
think,
you
yeah.
then get to you then start understanding these people almost as gods, and I don't feel like that sometimes really helps
Yes,
your
I think you
experience.
are absolutely right. I think it was originally, as I understand, the reason why initially that started happening was good because
Mm-hmm.
traditionally in India, the guru was respected like a god. But over the period of time, like again, as a part of appropriation,
Mm-hmm.
as part of showing the power, most of the places they started making making it more authoritative. They
Yeah.
started it become like a power symbol rather than the respect
Yeah,
that
exactly, exactly.
that
And this for me is
yeah,
another red flag that we didn't mention. When it's almost
yeah,
like the inverse. It's almost not,
yes,
well, it's still cultural appropriation, but it's almost on the other spectrum of cultural
true,
appropriation,
true.
right?
It
You have
it
the people
becomes more
doing
like a
not
power
enough,
practice.
and then people overdoing it and being
Correct.
over keen on every single aspect of the yoga philosophy, every single aspect of your of using Sanskrit, of being
Yeah.
so like micromanagerial when it comes to yoga, then I think it gets to a point where it actually stops being yoga, if that makes sense. Like
Yes.
it's
Right.
almost the two ends of the scale where they're doing too little and there's people like it's too much. This has become a
Yeah.
cult now. So please
True.
watch out because it's way more common than you would think
True.
in yoga, and it's something that I personally struggle a little bit with because especially as we evolve, we realize that we're all the same. So it doesn't make a lot of sense
Yeah.
that you then create more barriers and that you create more distance in between us when actually it's the opposite. You just relate more and more to each other the more you practice more yoga and the more you advanced in your yoga journey. So look out for that. It's just something that popped into my head and I was like, no, I need to say this. I know that some people may take this the wrong way, but I just
Yeah.
really don't like that part of the culture. And I think, yeah, it's important for people to be aware as well of the other side of,
That's true.
of the coin. Is there anything else that we're missing in terms of like do's and don'ts? I'm trying to.
No, I think if we get again to the first thing, if we are able to ask
Yeah,
questions, we are curious, we cover everything.
yeah.
We should do that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the do's and the don'ts, it's actually at the end of the day really simple and just yeah, it just goes down to that, right? Asking questions and doing a little bit of research. You don't have to fully go into yoga if you don't want
No.
to, but just having a basic understanding of what the
Yes.
practice is. And if you don't know, ask your teacher what the
Yes.
practice is about, and we'll be more than happy to tell you. And I think this is sort of like the perfect lead. So sort of the perfect segue onto our next question, which is what kind of questions should you and can you ask
Hmm.
your yoga teacher to understand their
Yeah.
values and to understand their view of yoga? What are some of these questions that people should ask?
Yes, we did say ask questions, and this is important. So
Mhm.
as I said that we should definitely know about the teacher. So we should. It's quite imperative if we are asking the questions. It's good to know, and we are asking the questions to know that understand the teacher much better. So, for example, what drew her to yoga or him to yoga, and how it has shaped his or her life? Because questions like this, they really provide insights into the personal connection and commitment of the teacher to yoga. You would know what their journey has been,
Mhm.
like you said earlier. And maybe at times you can relate to it. Maybe at times you find inspiration in that journey, but at the same time, you will know the commitment level of the teacher to yoga and how deep she or he themselves have been to it. Second is you may also ask, like, if you are spiritually inclined, for example, can you share your perspective on the spiritual aspects of yoga? What it does is it helps to understand whether the teacher embraces yoga beyond its physical aspects and values its spiritual dimensions. And so going
Mhm.
forward, if you are into mindfulness meditation, that's your goal. You can ask teacher related, how do you incorporate those aspects into your sessions? For example, it's not possible if you are doing a regular asana focus class or a posture class to get mindfulness and meditation. But like cats, I see you doing it. You have this sharing circle, right?
Mhm.
So where you can address, you bring in different topics, you bring in, so that's your way of incorporating, bringing that holistical thing to your practice and for your students or for people who are connected to you for yoga. So that's I really appreciate and admire that all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, so it's for us to ask them and it's for us them to, I think again, I keep saying they will be happy if they are genuinely into it, they would be
Yes.
happy to share it.
Yes.
And if they're
Yes.
cutting corners, that's a red flag. That's not the place for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then, yeah, of course, you should ask about the historical and cultural roots of yoga. It's not possible in a day-to-day scenario, but that's what I said. Take those 5 minutes out, try to understand. And this gives you an insight how the teacher honors the cultural context. So, are
Yeah.
you at
If
the
they
right
know
place?
how much they know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
think
then,
it's a good
yeah,
point as well that all those questions because you you also I was kind of putting myself in sort of my teachers, well, me as a teacher. If you ask me questions and if you're curious about something, you may also be giving me ideas in terms of ways that I can maybe share a little bit more and my classes become better for it. So
yeah,
I'll be super grateful if you just come to me with lots of questions and you just want to know more about the practice because actually the sharing circle that I host, which is a bit more It's still yoga, by the way. It's still a yoga session, can still be seen as a yoga practice. It has nothing physical about it. Just, by the way. And it very much came from all these questions that people had and all their curiosity about, spirituality and yoga philosophy, because even though we may be touching on it a little bit during classes, we didn't have a dedicated space for it, and we only teach for an hour. Like, it's impossible to cover everything, and yoga is so vast. So, but it very much came from people around me wanting to know more about it. So definitely ask questions, because that will probably prompt us into like creating new spaces for you, or changing our classes a little bit so they incorporate more things, to make the yoga class a little bit more special, for you. Sorry, keep going.
No, no. I think these, like for me, these are the vital questions. These are the things you should know to understand your teacher, to understand, because yoga is not like a one-day practice. It's not like a one-off. It's
Hmm.
not a tick mark on your daily checklist. If you are treating, then you are doing a very physical practice. You cannot get into, you are taking the mindfulness completely out of your practice. But if you are looking for a sustained practice, a long-term practice, definitely you need to work with your teacher closely, and you should know who is your guru. If that's your intention, so that's only when you get the light in your life. Otherwise, that's the meaning of guru, to take you out of the
Yeah,
darkness.
yeah,
so
exactly.
so
From darkness
yeah,
into light.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important, especially the resonating with your teacher, and resonating with their experiences, and why they're teaching yoga, because I think it's very valid for a person to want to do the stretches and the physical part as a way to relieve stress. That's fine. That's something actually I encourage. I usually say about my classes, if anything, I want you to feel a little bit lighter at the end of the session, right? And if I've managed to calm your busy mind a little, then I'm happy, and I've kind of fulfilled my purpose. But at the same time, whilst I want you to relieve stress in the moment, I also want to teach you and put you on a path to self
yeah,
development, so that you no
true,
longer experience stress
yeah,
never ever in your life. So there, I always have like sort of
yeah,
this sort of subliminal
right,
objective in my mind, because that is what yoga really is about. So it's not just about relieving stress. It's really about, um, this path to healing, to overcoming trauma, to overcoming stress, to living a life that's more connected to the essence of life, which has nothing to do about, stress. And just to say that it's valid if you just want the stress part, but try to understand like what is yoga, and what is not yoga, if that makes
yeah,
sense. Because just stretching, then that's stretching. You don't need to call it yoga. You don't need to
yeah,
say that you're practicing
true,
yoga.
yes,
So yeah, I guess I would just, yeah, consider that, a little bit, and how committed you are. And maybe you don't need to be super committed when you start off, because I wasn't. I When I started practicing yoga, I very much started wanting to keep my body fit. It was
yeah,
purely a fitness thing for me. I knew that it was quite soft on the body. I don't like heavy or very intense physical exercise. So for me, perfect. A soft way to exercise to keep my body fit. But then I realized, so you don't even have to like to have this huge commitment from the get go. But as you brought into that, and as you sort of become more and more interested in that, and as you look forward to your classes, then that's maybe the sort of the little thing that you need to then start learning more
yeah.
about the practice, and understanding, what it is, and whether you're really practicing yoga or not.
I think it's very important for all of us to know that you don't need to change anything for yoga. You
Mm,
don't need to adopt to yoga. Yoga adapts to your life. That's the purpose of yoga, that you should be able to use it in your daily life. It should help you in your daily life. That's the core purpose. So you don't really, most of the people think, oh, I need to change my diet. I need to change this. I did need
yeah,
to
no,
change this. I need to do so many things to get
no.
into yoga.
The thing
No.
is, the thing is, the beautiful thing is, after a while, you'll do that naturally.
Yeah. It
So
it it happen. Your body automatically
yeah,
responds. Your
exactly,
mind responds to all those
exactly,
things.
exactly. It's not something that you are expected to do. But then, say you look back and you're like, oh
Yeah.
wow, I changed so many things about
Yeah.
myself, and they will never feel forced. They will never
Yes.
feel
No. I
out of,
think
yeah, out of your lifestyle, or out of yourself, if that makes sense. It'll be very natural, very organic.
yes. It is natural. Like for me, it's I think it definitely is about awareness. When
Mm-hmm.
you start paying attention to your body, it's like you suddenly have those extra listening skills. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about hearing, it's also about feeling every day, how you feel about everything. Like for me, after eating a certain meal, I started feeling in a certain way, and then I realized that if I
Mm-hmm.
change a bit, it helps me so much. And then it automatically, nobody told me to do it, not even myself trying to do. It's like
Mm-hmm.
over, like you said, when I look back, oh my God, I used to have this. Now I can't have it
Yeah.
anymore like this. So
Yeah.
it's a natural transition. The transformation is natural.
Yeah.
It's not a forced transition. And that's why I think you can sustain it and you
Mm-hmm.
can always carry it with you. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's another red flag, by the way. If you're suddenly met with these expectations, and you're
Yeah.
suddenly met with a lot of things that you need to catch up on,
Yeah.
and if anybody is forcing you anything, a good example that we see actually quite a lot is sort of the adherence to veganism or being a vegetarian. Um, I how to say this? So I am a vegetarian. I become a vegetarian. Actually, nothing to do with yoga. It kind of fit with my practice, and again, it was very organic transformation for me. But um, it shouldn't. It's not something that you should be forced upon, and it's certainly not something that yoga will
Yeah.
force you to do or to
No.
become. So if you do come across a studio or a place that's suddenly very much forcing you into this, I would say that's also a red flag. Even though
True.
I love being a vegetarian, for me, everybody will become a vegetarian. It's not something for somebody to force upon you. Yoga is a personal practice. So you
Yes.
have your own time, you're on your own journey, and yoga teachers are only holding space and guiding you on this journey. Um, yeah, I feel like we don't recognize this enough because we see teachers as from a position of power, right? And we tend to do everything that they say, um, when that's actually not the role of a yoga teacher.
Yes. And to summarize it, I would like to all my fellow teachers, to my colleagues, I would like to say one thing out of my experience, but this is a quote from Krishnamacharya, who was a very renowned yoga guru and also considered as the father of modern yoga. He said that teach what is inside you, not as it applies to you, to yourself, but as it applies to the other. So that's the key thing, that most of the times in our practices, we think this is how it works for us, and we
Mm,
start teaching it in the same way. But we have to understand the student, we have to understand what is he feeling about this practice, and then maybe if we bring that or take it forward like that, then it helps both of us.
yeah, that's such a beautiful quote. I think because it's also about leading by example.
Yeah,
And if you follow your own yoga path, then you are inherently sharing it with other people, if that makes sense. So when you work, because sometimes we have this urge to sort of like fix people or change people or help people, when actually the only thing that we need to do is help ourselves.
true.
And when we help ourselves through the practice of yoga, then we are helping other people because other people will see the change, will notice how we do things differently, will be inspired, and will also um, try to follow us in that path. And so, yeah, don't be too pressured, I think, about teaching.
No?
Try to experiencing it more, and then it'll sort of
Yes,
like come out of you
true.
naturally. Easier said than done, I know. Um, but that quote is
Always,
beautiful, and yeah, and a beautiful
always. Yeah,
reminder of that, of the true nature of being a yogi and teaching yoga
true.
to others.
Yes.
That's it, I feel like. Um,
Yeah.
we touched on
Wow.
a lot today, and it's been a long conversation. Hopefully, that was interesting for you guys listening. We tried to keep it somewhat structured, but as you can see, we're very passionate about this topic. We still hope that you've learned a few things today. Again, I wouldn't be too stuck on anything, and as we've mentioned in this podcast, take what resonates and leave everything else. And to say also a big thank you for Aneesh for sharing this space with me, for helping me have this
Thank you.
conversation. Thank you.
It's a
I
pleasure.
felt for many years that I really shouldn't be touching on this topic because obviously I'm a white yoga teacher. I felt like I didn't have the right. But then I thought, what are you talking about? Like, you love this.
How
You
dare
you
you
spend
do
so much
this?
time learning this, and it needs to be said because some things out there are just ridiculous, and we do need to sort of I do need to stand up for what I believe, basically. So I'm super happy to have you, super happy to have this conversation. Thank you so much again for being here, for sharing these insights. Everybody listening, thank you. And yeah, was a pleasure. Anish, one last question that I'm going to ask you as we say goodbye. Is there anything else that you feel like you should share with this collective? What is sort of one last message, a few parting words from you?
Well,
I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
no, it's just that I always feel that yoga is a practice you are always learning, continuously learning,
Mhm.
and you have to do it with awareness, and it automatically starts helping you and in your daily challenges, daily life challenges. So, and I really believe that if you have learned something really, really well, then the way you express it will not be same as the way you have learned it. It would definitely enlighten the people around you. It's definitely going to change your own life and change lives around you. So be
Mhm.
that good light, source of light,
Yeah.
and that's what matters at the end of the day.
I think that's a beautiful message, and just made me think of another red flag. Oh my god. Very quick one. If you feel like the yoga teacher is way too complicated when it comes to explaining spirituality, philosophy, and yogic terms, be mindful, because when you understand things really well, you should be able to communicate them with simplicity. So
I
that's
hope I'm not.
yeah.
I hope
No,
I
no,
was not the one driving that thought here.
not at all, not at all. It's just because I've been to a few conferences before where there were these renowned yoga masters speaking, and fair enough, I probably wasn't at a point where I should be able to understand them. But I also questioned, like, why do they need to be so secretive, and why do they need to be so
No,
complicated? I don't know, that didn't quite sit well with me, because I read a lot of from the great master BKS Iyengar, and his books are so simple
yes,
and so easy to understand that it kind of made me question if those
yes.
yoga masters
No,
really
I
know what
have
they're talking about.
also read a couple of books from him, and I completely agree what you're saying. Completely agree on your perspective. And if these people they are throwing jargons on you, all those Sanskrit verses, and trying to impress you with that, yoga is much more
Yeah,
simple. It's not complex. It's very, very simple.
yeah. And it's once you experience that, you actually, when you embody that, then
Yeah.
it comes very easily, flows very
Yes.
easily from you. All right, that's it. Thank you, Anish.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
It's a
much.
pleasure.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much for listening, Yogi. I hope you found this conversation helpful, positive, and insightful as well, because I feel like sometimes we want to do the right thing, but there's just so much out there and there's just so much going on that it's tricky to navigate life and even the yoga world. So, thank you so much for taking the time today. I think it's important that we are at least trying to find ways where we can honor the roots of yoga a little bit better, a little bit, a little bit more. And I also want to say, as a little bit of a final message, is that we don't necessarily need to get everything right, because again, this is a concept and a notion that it can be very nuanced, and it's definitely a subject that has a lot to it, and we've only here covered a small part of it. So the point is not necessarily getting everything right, or getting too upset by not getting everything right, but it's more about learning and being open to learning and understanding these cultural differences and how we can make the most out of them, in the sense of how can we really make sure that we are respecting a culture that not ours, and how we can make sure that we're open to understanding these differences and celebrating them as well, because at the end of the day, we're all unique, we're all very different, and differences should be celebrated. So just the fact that you've taken your time today to learn more about this issue, it's already a very important step in the right direction. So thank you so much for being here, for listening. If you'd like to work with me or Anish, or if you'd like to sort of connect with us further to learn more about this topic, or even share your feedback, your thoughts, I'll leave in the sort of in the show notes, well, in the description thingy of the episode, all the links and all the handles that you need to connect with us further. And yeah, just thank you so much for being here. I hope you're enjoying these guests that I've been bringing on to this show. If you do, please let me know. And as always, if you have any thoughts, any feedback on how to make this show even more relevant for you and your healing and your yoga journey, please do let me know. Until then, I will be connecting with you over a guided meditation, and hopefully next with a new guest. To be honest, I still don't have that episode recorded, and I'm still figuring out what topic is next. So yeah, stay tuned, and I'll be back for another episode. Until then, take care. I'll see you soon. Bye.